John Steiner was born in Czechoslovakia in 1925, which you already know. It was just after his birthday. He spent the years from 1942 to 1945 in several concentration, labor, and death camps. After the war, he eventually emigrated to Australia from Czechoslovakia and earned a master's degree in sociology. He continued his studies at the University of California, Berkeley in sociology, and he earned a Ph.D. magna cum laude in sociology with minors in psychology and psychopathology from the University of Freiburg in Germany. He joined the faculty at Sonoma State University in 1968, and he became an emeritus professor in 1993 after 25 years of service to the students of the university. During productive tenure at Sonoma State, Dr. Steiner was the recipient of 2 Fulbright scholarships, and he also served as a Humboldt Research Fellow at the University of Freiburg in Germany. He has a significant number of publications, including the book Power, Politics, and Social Change in National Socialist Germany, a process of escalation to mass destruction. He has been included in many books, and you have all read the beginning of what is a larger memoir, his reflections of experiences in Nazi death camps and he has also written an article, Conditions and Survival in Nazi Death Camps. In addition to his scholarly work, Dr. Steiner has served as advisor and commentator on several documentaries. Some have been broadcast locally on KRON and also on KPFA FM. Dr. Steiner is the founding director of the Holocaust Study Center at Sonoma State University and serves us now as our senior scholar in residence. He continues an active career as a scholar and will soon publish his research, which explores previously unmined areas of the Nazi regime, which points out the loopholes and contradictions in Nazi racial policies. He has already published it. I'd like to read to you just briefly about Dr. Steiner's latest project, or one of his latest. He interviewed Mrs. Amelia Heusel in Klagenfurt, Austria. She was a Ravensbrück inmate who was personally interviewed by Adolf Hitler and released by him from Ravensbrück. An article of this incident will be published by the Austrian Document Center in Vienna in the year 2000. Steiner's interview will be the first recorded account of Hitler's visit to a slave labor camp and his personal release of a female inmate. And Dr. Steiner also worked to help her get compensation for the years that she spent as a slave laborer and an inmate. John Steiner's work, his life's work, has aimed at shedding light on the processes which Holocaust. As a sociologist and a social psychologist, he has used his unique insights as both a scholar and a survivor to explore the process. Won't you welcome our own Dr. Steiner.
Thank you, Myrna, for a very generous, maybe undeserved introduction, which is nevertheless very much appreciated. Let me start and perhaps apologize for something which is unavoidable due to the shortage of time available for this lecture. And so therefore I had to cut it down to the bones. And I hope that I would talk off the cuff and relate things to you in my own space, time-space that is. And that won't be possible because the time would not permit it. So most of it I will have to read to you in my non-actor type of reading, although I think at times I have to be actor, otherwise I might not have survived, but that's beside the point. So let me just, why I'm interested in this research, you know, from what you have read in the experiences, you may possibly know what has motivated me to look into the dreadful and very important question of why people behave towards each other the way they have in death camps and concentration camps, and that applies to both, not only the perpetrators, but also to inmates in terms of what they've been reduced to under those conditions. So let me just start summarizing some of the most important points. Hopefully we'll have enough time to discuss something and respond to questions. And I won't start with a joke. If we have enough time, I'll tell you the joke after I've finished my presentation. In the camps and after World War II, outside the camp, I was puzzled and preoccupied with horrors and what I call the mega-violence and mega-hurt witnessed the way human beings behave towards each other, as I've said just a moment ago. How could this mega-suffering be caused, produced by situations in which behaved absolutely destructively? How in these situations perpetrators revealed worst possible traits which they themselves had not known they had within them. Among fellow inmates, I encountered people I had known in freedom, so-called civilian life, who appeared to be very decent human beings, turned in the camps to cruel, vicious individuals, and in turn how others, and under the same conditions, became virtually saints who were saving the lives of others or protecting them. They were self-sacrificing altruists. So this transformation is something which was really absolutely amazing, and that was what really motivated me to see how the destructive group was overwhelmed by the power of the situation which others determined, not they, but others determined for them. Why? It is interesting to note that one even could find occasionally supportive individuals among the ranks of the SS, which was also very amazing. Only information which gave me very limited insight into this question, which was most central to my interest. I therefore decided to go back to the perpetrators after the war, of course, and quite a few years after the war, because I was not ready to do anything of that nature besides I had other preoccupations. So after quite a few years, I decided to turn to the perpetrators, interview them, tape these interviews whenever possible, and in over 80% it was possible, and that was also a great surprise to me. Eventually I also designed a questionnaire which, with the support of my first interviewee, a former well-known SS general, I was able to distribute to the former members of the SS about 200, not about, but exactly 228 questionnaires which were filled in by former members of the SS, and to a control group of 202 German World War II veterans. When I started my interviews with SS personnel, I was obviously very apprehensive and expected to be run into great deal of difficulty. And I remember still when I rang the doorbell, the first doorbell, of a prospective interview who happened to be a namesake of mine, a General Felix Steiner, with considerable trepidation, only to be utterly surprised by the type of welcome and hospitality I received. All which was at first very and most confusing. This feeling was even heightened when I was subsequently invited to meetings and reunions of former members of the SS, and in 2 cases as a guest of honor, no less. In one of these events, I was requested to address a crowd of former members of the SS with their families who had come from all parts of Germany as well as from abroad, also, by the way, from South America. There were about 1,000 persons present. I was to sit at a table of honor with a senior SS general officer whom I had interviewed some years ago. These encounters and experiences are a story by itself, and I will not burden you with details at this time. Most of this is already part of a typed manuscript, so anyone who is interested in it, they can get a copy or copy it themselves and read it. What took me by utter surprise was the total contrast from my experiences in the camps with a SS hatchetmen which had remained indelibly impressed in my memory. They appeared to me as one-dimensional cardboard figures, an incarnation of supreme evil. At the time when I was in the camp, and outside of the camp, I would have said, yes, I would like to befriend that person, I would like to be that person's neighbor, and that was very, very confusing to me to begin with. In the camp, they reflected the internalized, ideological, compartmentalized organizational structure of the SS, which was, by the way, very compartmentalized and not at all monolithic by any means. Consequently, their mind, feelings, and emotions had also become dissociated, separated, and detached from each other. With such a mindset, they had become conditioned to perform unspeakable cruelties and mass killings, which made genocide possible, a well-known reality, a fact. Although, as we have heard just a moment ago, there are deniers who still say nothing of that sort happened. I wish they were right, because my mother and many of my relatives and many of those other people who were killed, who still miss their relatives who were killed, would have still their relatives drastically changed circumstances and situations, make people behave differently. They bring out personality traits which were not manifest before. They can be highly destructive on one hand or constructive on the other, and reflect the social and what I call the social and moral intelligence, whatever level it is on. In this sense, are all what I call sleepers, because under certain circumstances, certain traits which heretofore were dormant in us emerge, and we will behave in a way which we have not even expected ourselves. And that's a very interesting phenomenon, because these situations, very powerful situations, then stimulate a type of behavior which had not been manifest and viewed or witnessed by others and ourselves before. So, what does this suggest? It appears that ordinary people, and that's our topic tonight, And next time, I'm quite sure, because my friend Philip Zimbardo will, I'm sure, talk about it as well, from a different perspective. It appears that ordinary people with a relatively low social and moral intelligence will tend to be more easily influenced by an authority molded by the power of a situation than persons with a higher social and moral intelligence or you, who will be able to transcend the power of a situation and also more likely determine it rather than being determined by the situation. And that will be very obvious also in their action. So it will not be just a mindset, but what they have understood and what they really feel will be enacted. These persons, in contrast to the ordinary people, could be viewed as what I might call, or what we might call, extraordinary, causing either good, benign, or evil deeds. They can be innovators, they can be statesmen, discoverers, dictators, movie stars, entertainers, or as I call them, boom boom, or rock stars, couch potatoes. Well, of course, they would not be extraordinary, but they would be ordinary people, the couch potatoes, and we've got quite a number of them among us, not necessarily in this lecture hall, but in this society. Presidents with or without monikers, tyrants, and so forth, and so on. Let us now return to the SS example. It is important to know that former members of the SS, which include, of course, perpetrators, have by and large not come to the attention of the post-World War II criminal justice system, and that is something very amazing. And I think I've got an answer as to why they have not come to the attention of the post-war criminal justice system. This can be at least partially explained if their authoritarian disposition is brought into focus. Authoritarian disposition, authoritarianism. This underlying authoritarian attitude made it easier for them to adjust and adhere to the laws of post-World War II Constitution of the Federal Republic of Germany. They had remained obedient to higher state authority, even though politically and ideologically they had switched from a totalitarian to a democratic persuasion. How deep that persuasion is another question. Now, how is the power of a situation reflected in everyday social structures? We can use this auditorium, and we'll talk about in a moment, as an example. But first, I'd like to share with you some of the findings provided by in the 1970s, in which the retention or change of attitude and the adjustment of former members of the SS to democratic institutions in the German Federal Republic is being investigated. They show that of a group of 228 former members of the SS, including all SS formations, and before that it was by no means a monolithic organization, but highly departmentalized, involving all SS formations, but predominantly members of the Waffen-SS responding, that is to say the military SS, military part of the SS, responding to multiple choice questions. 106 gave preference to and loyalty, and 122 to justice. 192 regard their former membership of their SS formation with satisfaction, and only 35 with disappointment or as an inevitable occurrence. One person did not respond to the question. Of a comparable group of 202 German veterans of World War II, 37 expressed preference for honor and loyalty, and 160 for justice. 63 regarded their membership of one of the formations of the German armed forces with satisfaction, and 137 with disappointment or as an inevitable occurrence. 2 did not respond to the question. 2, only 2. Consequently, there appears to be a significant difference in attitude between these two groups, both regarding their activity during World War II as possibly of Nazi ideology in general. Despite the foregoing attitude to value norms, former members of the SS show an overt readiness and ability to adjust, or if you will, over-adjust to novel situations. That's a very interesting thing. They have a tendency to adjust or to over-adjust to novel situations for reasons I've already mentioned, by virtue that they are very high on the authoritarian scale. This was reflected in their answers to multiple choice questions, in which 172 expressed preference for democracy. 33, that is the German veterans of World War II. 172 expressed preference to democracy, 33 showed a preference for monarchy, and 21 for dictatorship. 4 did not respond to the question, and 2 showed equal preference for democracy and monarchy. Of the control group of 202 veterans, 165 expressed preference for democracy, 22 for monarchy, 10 for dictatorship, and 5 expressed equal preference for democracy and monarchy. Statistical difference, of course, are significant in both groups. And other findings are being correlated with their standing on the F scale, which is called the fascism scale. Finally, the past and present religious affiliation of former members of the SS, 31.1% were believers in God, which was a kind of heathen, new kind of religious affiliation created by the National Socialists, primarily Himmler, which was called Gottgläubig, believers in God, or God believers. In 1965, that was responded to in 1966, which also suggests that from a sociological point of view, the Nazi ideological doctrines, social systems, and subsystems, aggression, and war morale, while those oriented to different values did not give such strong support. So we have a significant difference between the SS, who were, of course, primarily responsible for the Holocaust, a certain part of the SS, by no means all, and we ought to make that very clear. All right, so that gives you some sort of a, based on the assessment of questionnaires. Now then we have to look into what does a power of situation really mean? What does it involve? Reflected in everyday social structures, we can use this auditorium and lecture series as an example, and then have a look at the chart I've prepared here. Let's talk about, first of all, this lecture hall. So we are here with a certain purpose. We are part of an institution of higher learning. We are specifically engaged in the research and the understanding of the Holocaust and genocides in general. And we have a certain, if you will, understanding, what we call a social contract, that when you are a student, you are expected to attend lectures, you are expected to listen for reasons which at times may escape you to the lecturers, and you are not to stand behind the door and wait until the lecture is over and then sign the sheets here, the attendance sheets, and disappear. Well, that's deviant behavior. This deviant behavior only can be, in democratic situations, punished by a poor grade or a rebuke or what have you. It's certainly not life-threatening event. And then now we come, for example, to the person you have heard about, Amelia Heusel, whom I've interviewed last summer and the summer before, who was brought to Ravensbrück because she deviated from what was then a National Socialist social contract, which meant that you couldn't say anything bad about the leaders. You were not allowed to work if you had not a permission in a certain particular place. So she was working, Amalia was working in a very interesting restaurant in a place called Klagenfurt, with its southern, also very straightforward, and speaks her mind. She said, I don't want to work there, and I don't feel like working there at all. I'm very happy working in the restaurant in whatever capacity, which was a minor capacity, to be sure. And I said, I don't want to. So then the lady in charge, who called her in the first place and was going to send her to another job, said, well, Adolf Hitler wants you to do that. He wants you to work where we send you. And then Amalia, a very naive young person at that particular point in time, said, well, Hitler can kiss my you-know-what. And so that the office lady said, just a moment, wait here, I have to make a very important call. I just, have to step away for a moment. And then she called, yes, a very important call indeed. She called the Gestapo, the secret police, and they came and they put her to Ravensbrück. And the end of the story is very interesting, because when Hitler asked her, why are you here? She said, I can't tell you, I'm ashamed, I can't, I'll whisper it in your ear. But no, you can say that. Himmel stood next to Hitler, by the way. And you can tell me that. And so I said, Hitler can kiss my whatever. And so he laughed and said, well, you can go home. That is a fact. It's the first sort of thing which we ever have been able to determine as an occurrence which took place in a slave labor camp. All right, so these are the contrasts. Here, not very much will happen to you. At the worst, you'll get a grade which you certainly have deserved because you're cheating, and they're not going to cost you life. It's not going to endanger you in any way whatsoever. But if you deviated in a totalitarian society, you were sent to a concentration camp and could very easily lose your life. So let me just explain to you some of the things which will make things a little bit more clear what is part of the situation involves. So I hope I have to push something someplace here. Right. So to begin with, we all play roles. And all the roles we play are in one structure or the other. If you are in the family, you are in the familiar structure. If you are in a job, you are in an existential structure, and so forth and so on. So a structure without positions would not exist, would not be a reality. Now, a role has a position in the structure, and that is part of the social contract, and you know what is expected of you when you play the role of the student, which is your position. And then you also have to behave in a way which will fit the expectation. That is normative, and all that has a status, and you know less, although some people don't heed that there may be a slight difference between the president of Sonoma State and a student, and that you will address him accordingly. If you address a professor, you may call him by the first name, which I oppose, because I think we didn't go to school together. But anyway, so that's a matter of choice. So therefore, there is enough leeway in any way that you can act upon choice. And most people forget that or are not aware of the fact. So this sort of leeway, this margin, choice margin, enables you to reflect your true personality, because that will also reflect on your moral level and social level of sophistication. That's really important. The way we use our role margin, what I call role margin. So all this, of course, when we interact with each other under those conditions, the structure and the position in which we play our role, produces situations to which we then respond. And that, although many of us, or perhaps we can even say most of us, are not really conscious as to what is happening under those circumstances, the more conscious we are of it, the more careful we will be in playing our role, which of course under any circumstances will have consequences. And these consequences will affect other people in a very specific way, which may be positive, benign, or negative. All right. I don't want to spend more time on that because we've got so many other things to do. I hope that is clear. You can, if there are any questions, you can ask me during the lecture and answer period. Question and answer. All right. Now comes perhaps the less boring part. In order to make that very clear, what we have said, I will illustrate that with a video. A video which was produced in Yugoslavia and depicts a war situations between SS troops who try to catch and deal with the partisans, and you know that in Serbia, and we talk about specifically Serbia, in which partisan activity was very strong under the leadership of Broz Tito. And what does Tito mean? Tito means you that, and that in Yugoslav. Tito, you this, you that. He was the commander. He was the commander of the partisans, and then of course he was also the president of the Yugoslav Social Republic. So you will see, and that's very important that you note very carefully, and that's why I told you all these sort of boring details beforehand, so that you better can discern what is really taking place there. This movie is called Silences. No word is being spoken. And it depicts precisely how an SS battalion was attacked by partisans and what sort of consequences that had. After they had killed them, you've had people who looted and took the clothing of the dead SS men, and then you see there is one person which is very important, talking about the power, the choice which we have, the margin choice. There was one person who was looting or taking the clothing of the killed SS people, and comes to a person who is still alive, an SS soldier who is still alive. And he's in the process of taking off his clothing, and then he sees he's alive, and then he stops, he's with a friend, and then they stop, look at each other, don't say a word, and decide to rescue that soldier, to rescue that soldier. And that is being done in spite of a group of partisans who confront them. The one rescuer is so scared and afraid he runs away, and the other one continues his act of rescuing, brings him to his village where he wanted to help him and treat him, first aid, only to hear a lot of shooting and all that, and when he comes to his village, he sees the village has gone up in flames, and most of the people are killed. Then he has a change of mind. And then from a rescuer, he becomes a killer. And that's exactly what you're going to do.
Could someone get the light for me, please? I need the light again, please. Please. Thank you.
When was that made, huh?
In the 60s. I don't know exactly, I don't remember exactly 60s. I think we have to turn because it's done. Thank you. Intelligence and social intelligence, we will continue and show some degree of courage because we know it's right. Also be willing to pay the price for it. But so many people, because of the power situation, will change their mind and will go the easiest way rather than do what they think is really right. You know, so that is something which is exceedingly important for us to learn, to what extent we are distant. So we act upon choice in virtue of all roles we play, consider or not consider the consequences of our actions and be accountable for them. We also can develop concern, compassion and charity in our interaction with others if we choose to act, develop some sort of understanding of what is right and what is wrong. If we don't continue and take the next step to act upon what we understand to be right. Let's come to a conclusion which will briefly summarize some of the important points why perpetrators are ordinary people. One, they are ordinary if they are undistinguished, average, usually not too educated people who tend to be high on the authority indoctrinated to act upon the biddings and orders of superiors and leaders. And we need to also understand that without the ordinary people, the leaders would not be in their positions, because the ordinary people enabled them, namely the people who have a leadership, not only potential, but ambition to get into that position, because they make it possible for them in the first place. So they help them in one way or the other to be elevated into a power position. Put differently, in the interaction between perpetrators, superiors, and leaders, we can observe a simple relationship which may produce a constructive on one hand or destructive on the other hand an outcome, which can be either constructive or destructive. Obviously, in the case of the perpetrators, it is a destructive one. Ordinary people will tend to be more readily molded by situations rather than determine them. However, they play, as I said before, an important part in selecting and supporting their leaders and maintain them into power positions by simply acting upon their biddings, acting upon their orders, or acting upon what is expected of them by the... It is in the power of the ordinary people to elevate those and depose the leaders, but only members of a collective which cannot be ignored or dealt with by sending them, let's say, to concentrations or simply have them shot, can succeed to depose the leaders. But again, that is the power of the ordinary people. Thirdly, we can conclude that initiators and highly positive desk chair or armchair perpetrators occupying and maintaining an elevated power position will not likely be ordinary in terms, in contrast to the hatchet men, the perpetrators. They are not ordinary because they have talents and attributes which will enable them to assume leadership roles and make extraordinary contribution in one way or another, which of course is in the analysis, in our analysis of perpetrators, destructive and genocidal. In general, extraordinary people create situations rather than be molded by them. They are in a position to produce situations which will have a very constructive or very destructive outcome and effect on a larger segment of society. So let us then, fourthly, let us then be clear that ordinary people co-determine situations by being a pliable force and, if you will, a silent or indoctrinated, frantic or frenzied majority. Silent or indoctrinated, fanatic, even frenzied majority. Elevating extraordinary people into power positions, some well-known examples are, for example, Nero, Caligula, Napoleon, Stalin, Mao, Hitler, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Milosevic, and Saddam, just to name a few. It is also something very important for us to realize, just as in case of Hitler and his cohorts, that their power and influence enables them to tell lies worded as truth. Now that is a very important thing for us to consider, because we all have a conscience. We all have a conscience. But this conscience is repressed when we adhere to certain ideologies which tell us that our conscience needs to be changed so that we can act according to the ideology. For example, to accept the fact that Gypsies, Jews, Slavs, and other people are subhuman, and Germans are Aryan. And act accordingly, namely that we eliminate those we consider subhuman and cater to those people whom we consider a master race. So many people, for example, as I said earlier, compartmentalized their conscience so that they said, well, these people I can treat differently than my people, quote unquote, who happen to be superior. And therefore, them, I'm doing a favor to my society because I rid them of subhumans. Now, morally, that was very interesting. Hitler and all the clan knew that it was wrong. And that's why they used, as I said, the power to discern what is correct and what is not, even if we are exposed to ideological indoctrination, and say no to it. Stand up to be counted. And very few people are able to do that. And therefore, if you will, are victims of a given situation. How many times have you been every day, beginning with asking you, how are you? And you don't give a damn about how this person feels, but you ask that in most cases, not in all cases. So that's how it starts, very innocuous, nothing very serious, but that is the beginning of something which, if we are not aware of it, then we will not be aware of so many other things which will have very dire consequences. And that is something we can change by reflecting on these things and thinking about them, and assume sufficient courage, concern, and compassion. 3 C's. Just remember the 3 C's. Courage, concern, and compassion. By no means everything, because we also have to show some degree of charity at times. Courage, concern, and compassion. Because if you don't have that, if you are not aware of that you can develop it, then of course the power situation will be stronger than what you think is right and what you should be doing. And you're not doing it because you sell out. You don't stand up to be counted. Okay, I'll stop here and tell you perhaps the joke, if Moina will permit that time-wise. So I promised you the kind of anecdote. It's not really that funny, but it's very, very interesting and very instructional. A minister came by a small New England farm surrounded by a stone fence created by generations of those who had worked to make the land productive by removing the rocks and boulders turned up by the plow. Looking over the nice field of corn that was growing, the minister said to him working in the field, "My, that is a beautiful farm that you and God have put together." The farmer stopped and, wiping his sweaty brow, responded, "Yes, I guess you're right. But you should have seen it when God was handling it alone." In that spirit, humans must be engaged actively in the improvement of our world, using the tools of understanding, recognition, and acting upon the recognition, acting upon what you are learning, an institution of higher learning, and especially in a class like this, known as what? The name of that class, what is it? That's right, that's right. Any questions? I must have stumped you. You're not a student.
I know, but I got a question.
Well, they're gathering their thoughts together, aren't they?
I hope I have not overwhelmed you, but I've told you that, you know, I have very little time and I had to give you a little bit of what might help you better understand what it's all about. So maybe I may have overfed you. Yes?
Do you think that the guy in the film that was rescued, that he was rescued because, instead of charping, he's no longer in his role or position, they just saw him as human, and then once they saw the situation, they put him back into his role? Is that a common way of switching the way you see someone?
Well, he went pretty far, you know, if you noticed, you know, he went very far. He almost made it. But when he saw that all his relatives and the entire village in flame and the villagers killed, then he had a change of heart. And rescinded his decision to rescue. It's understandable psychologically or psycho-emotionally, but it is in a way inconsistent. Because first of all, the SS man whom he rescued was an enemy to begin with. But nevertheless, he rescued him. But because of what happened to the village, he could not continue because he felt a strong sense of what?
Loss.
Yeah, also revenge. Revenge. So yes, I think it is a very common occurrence, the change of heart, and this is something which we need to reflect upon. Just go through a day and then at night before you fall asleep, ask yourselves what you did and why you did what you did during that particular day. And that may give you some insight. And then you assess it morally and otherwise. To what degree have you lived up to the fact that you're being and humane? It's exceedingly important. And you can assess yourself, you don't need others for that. Self-examination, so to speak. Yes?
Dr. Steiner, is that still available? Can we get copies of it?
Not anymore. Not anymore because, first of all, it's very dated, number one. Number two, I don't think it's being sold anymore. And secondly, it's very difficult to copy these things because it may be against the law. Although Yugoslavia, as it used to exist then, no longer exists. So maybe there are some changes now, which may make it possible. All right? And this is my personal copy, so I can a few things if I choose to do so. Also, exactly, we talk about for what purpose, and do I have a profile in courage? I think I do. Am I a bureaucrat? No.
John, in your methodology, did you distinguish between constitutional monarchies and absolute monarchies?
No. No, we talked about monarchy in general.
Well, a constitutional monarchy would be democratic if they mixed them up.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know what you're mixing up, but you know, whatever they mix up. They didn't mix up because monarchy is a monarchy and you're talking about specific differences, and we were not going into the detail because we had too many questions as it was. That all?
Phil
Yes.
has a question.
Who? What? Phil?
I know I'm not a student.
Well, I mean, do we have a student first? Because students, oh yes. So, yeah.
The statistics that you listed, is there any way that we can upload them?
She wants to know if there's any way the students can have a copy of those statistics.
Yes, of course. Yeah, because these things have been published. Sure. Yeah, no problem. But you have to copy it. Or if we have enough money, we can copy it for you. I don't know. But yes, it can be copied. It has been published in German as well as in English. A lot of statistics and a lot of computer things. But that was still the early time of computers. So that's why we are doing all the things all over again, plus so many new things. Yeah. Right. She's not a student, but that's okay. Then you'll come.
Loudly so everybody can hear.
I have a question. You differentiated between moral and social intelligence and just general intelligence, or IQ. Are you saying that, do you feel that people who have a lower IQ will also have a lower intelligence?
No, not at all. But if you have a higher IQ, it may help. Namely, what sort of strategies, what sort of means you use in order to be moral and act morally and appropriately socially. So obviously the intelligence will enable you to do it in a way which will go over a little bit better if you don't know, if you're not too bright. But that doesn't mean that people who are not bright don't have social or cannot have social or moral intelligence. I don't say that at all. On the contrary, very frequently people who are not that dreadfully bright have a very high social and moral intelligence. Phil.
I wonder if you might expand a little bit on your statement that Hitler knew lying, because that sounds like it contradicts what one of the things that Steve Watters was saying, which was that Hitler remained throughout consistent in his rabid, radical anti-Semitism. What evidence do you base your statement on that he knew that he was lying?
Well, first of all, the table talks. I think it's very important where he also declares himself. And then my interviews with one of his chief secretaries, Christa Schroeder. And she told me things about how he twisted, and other people who were in his immediate environment who I had a chance to interview, which includes Otto Strasser, Speer, and so many other people. Because by no means I just, and some of the high SS officers who were very skeptical about his truthfulness. So I think there is plenty of evidence that he used the lies as I suggested, and used them whenever it suited him, when it helped him to reach his goals, which he set for himself.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for thank you for your patience, and